Time now for Campaign Chronicles. It is the 1st of May. I'm sure you've checked your calendar. Labour Day here in France and across the rest of the world as well. But President Nicolas Sarkozy has come in for widespread criticism for trying to crash the party. He's called a rally of supporters here in Paris, running counter to the traditional Union March. And that's upset people across the political spectrum. To talk about why, I'm joined here on set by our press reviewer, Elena Casas. Also on the line is Rainbow Murray from Queen Mary University of London. We'll come to you in just a moment, Rainbow. But first of all, Elena, first, just tell us why this is so controversial, can you?
Well, as Le Monde puts it on their front page, it's a very political 1st of May. Now, why is this a controversial thing? Every year we see a big annual union march here in the centre of Paris, and you might think that's essentially political. It's people campaigning for workers' rights. It's been used in the past to protest against retirement reform, that kind of thing. But for the French, it's extremely important that the unions remain officially apolitical. That's what the Le Monde is saying in its editorial. They strongly criticise Nicolas Sarkozy for trying to politicise this day by holding what's effectively a counter-rally designed to upset the unions, because, of course, he said a lot recently, calling the unions a fake representative for ordinary working people, saying they just represent vested interests instead of real workers. He said last week, of course, that his rally was going to represent real work. He has gone back on that and apologised for it, having first denied he ever said it, because a number of people got quite annoyed because they thought he was implying they did fake work. But nevertheless, his rally is still something that's very much upset the unions. But they're not the only target of Le Monde's criticism. He isn't, rather. They're also targeting those union leaders that have called on their supporters to vote for François Hollande, like the CGT. Why? Well, they say that the unions in France should remain strictly apolitical. It's not like in Britain when they fund political parties, for example. So they say the unions also have stepped beyond what their role is supposed to be.
And it's complicated even further by the far right. Marine Le Pen, she's organising a rally of her own.
Yes, now the far right has done this every year, the Front National, since 1988, supposedly to mark the birthday of Joan of Arc, who is one of their icons in their kind of tradition. But today, of course, it's going to take on a great deal more importance after she got 18% of votes in the first round of the presidential election. She will today give her supporters some kind of advice as to what she wants them to do when they get into a voting booth or not on Sunday. She'll probably tell them either to stay away from the polls or to vote blank. She's certainly not going to be calling on them to vote for Nicolas Sarkozy. She's betting on them staying with her, forming a strong voting bloc that she can then take to the parliamentary elections in June and defeat UMP candidates in as many seats as possible. Of course, he's still going all out, the papers point out, to try and stave her off, if you like, to try and win over those 18% of voters. That's what his real work rally is really about. But he's also upset a number of people within his own party, including Le Parisien says the Prime Minister, François Fillon, who thinks that the President, rather, is making an unpresidential sort of political use out of this rally. So it's upset people right across the political spectrum, from the right to the left. But can I ask you now then, Rainbow Murray, why is this issue of the unions being apolitical so important to the French? It might seem that unions are essentially a political thing, but it seems that their neutrality is key to this controversy, isn't it?
Unions are really quite as politically neutral as the French might wish them to be portrayed as, because they've long had communist sympathies. But I think it is a distinction between French political parties and British political parties. The British Labour Party has always had very strong union links, and that doesn't exist in France. And I think it's a sensitive issue, partly because it's seen as encroaching on the freedom of union members, that they shouldn't be directed how to cast their votes. And also because political parties don't want to be seen as de facto missing out on that block of voting.
In reality, though, Rainbow, presumably everyone really knows that everybody who's joining in those May Day marches is going to vote for François Hollande, though, don't they?
I don't think we can take it for granted that all of them are going to vote for François Hollande. Certainly the first round vote indicated that the vote was split across the unions. It wasn't a unanimous vote for François Hollande. Sarkozy got 14% of the union vote. Mélenchon got 19% of the union vote. The CGT that we talked about earlier that called to vote against Sarkozy, 25% of their first round vote went to Marine Le Pen.
Now, Nicolas Sarkozy has been widely criticised, hasn't he, for trying to make political use out of this, but he's far from the first French politician to try politicising May the 1st, isn't he?
He might not be the first, but he's not looking good out of his efforts to do it this time around, because it's more than just an attempt to politicise May the 1st. It's also an indication of how he's misjudged the public mood again. And I think this is one of the reasons why his political party is so uncomfortable with it, why François Fillon said on the radio that Sarkozy shouldn't be making unpleasant remarks about trade unions. I think people see this as another example of Sarkozy being bullish, of being insensitive, and of trying to force home his quite radically right-wing agenda at the moment, which recalls the themes of Pétain during the French occupation of travail, famille, patrie, of work, the family, and sort of national pride. And so Sarkozy is really trying to drum these themes home at the same time that everybody else would kind of like him to take a bit of a step back.
He had to do something, though, didn't he? Because he's behind in the polls. He's only got a couple of days to go. And to have all this, if you like, free publicity, perhaps for the left, wouldn't have been good for him.
One could say that it's a sign of desperation. Whether he wants to look desperate 4 days away from the polls opening is another matter. Hollande has had the luxury of not having to get involved, so he's not actually attending any of the marches. He's going off to a separate event to commemorate a former Prime Minister who died on this day 19 years ago. Whereas Sarkozy has no choice, really, but to do some kind of publicity stunt. But it's perhaps in character that the one that he's gone for has unruffled a few feathers.
What about Marine Le Pen, then? How does her rally fit into all this?
Marine Le Pen is a born publicity seeker, and she's seeking publicity now as ever. The reason it's getting more attention than usual is because all eyes are on her voters to see how they will swing in the second round, because that could potentially decide the election. It's also significant because today is the day that she's likely to make a declaration on how she intends to cast her vote, and she's going to say that she's not going to vote for either candidate, which isn't exactly a direction to her voters to do the same, but that's how it will be interpreted.
Rainbow, thanks for being with us. That's Rainbow Murray from Queen Mary University of London joining us on the line there. Elena, thanks to you as well. And more news, of course, really shortly. Gina will be here after the break.